The morning light poked through holes in the thick clouds. I was already awake. Soapony had to steer this jalopy. Sorry, Poseidon. We'll upgrade soon. However, Eclair and Sorbet had just woken up. I could tell because I could smell biscuits baking, despite the fact that we had no flour or any mix at all. I lifted myself out of the boat and undid my harness. The ladies had a small fire going, heating up one of the bread loaves. I shook myself moderately dry. Sorbet was still laying down, munching on her piece, while Eclair tossed me a nice toasty chunk. Warm bread was a nice change of pace. A little bit dry, though. Probably needed butter. Whatever that was like. I set my piece down and moved over to Sorbet. "How are you feeling this morning?" I asked. She swallowed her bread in the mouth and then winced. "Well, I'm horribly injured and in terrible pain, so I think I'm par for the course," she replied, making light of the situation. Probably defense mechanism. That, or she was really that optimistic. "So, other than pain, you feel fine? No chills, nausea, or light headaches?" I asked. She nodded. "None of that, just the hurt. But I figure if I can take my mind off it, all is well, Doc," she said. "Please, I never got a medical license." I smiled. "Well, in the interest of keeping your mind occupied, how about good conversation?" "What do you want to talk to me about?" she asked me. I furrowed my brows as I cycled topics through my head. "The mainland," I replied. She snorted. "Bit of a broad subject there," she said. I smirked. "You have an urgent meeting? A pressing engagement?" I said, gesturing to the open blue around us. She burst out laughing, then immediately winced and stifled herself. "Ow! Hurts to laugh," she moaned. After a few moments of collecting herself, she asked, "What do you want to know?" "What is it like over there?" I asked. She nodded. "Overall, imagine land as far as the eye can see, and all of that just a festering wound," she spat out. "A lawless, hate-filled wound bleeding with the blood of hundreds of innocent poor souls daily." That was eloquent. "So, not a place for summer vacation," I offered. She raised an eyebrow. I sucked that comic back in. "Now that's just the general picture. From then on there, it's got its up and downs," she explained further. "You've got the beacon of civilizations like Ten Pony Tower in my own stable city. And then there are pits of instant death like Uvingtor and Canterlot, not to exclude Everfree Forest." I did a double take at the mention of Canterlot being a pit of instant death. However, I wanted to keep the conversation positive. Good emotions help the sick and the wounded recover. "Could you tell me what Stable City was like?" I asked. Maybe thoughts of home would bring up good vibes. Her shrug told me maybe. "Well, about, say, 50 or so years ago, Stable 122 opened and got right to work on making the surface settlement. Tons of building supplies and tons of eager pony to use them. It went from an outpost to a town to a city in no time at all, practically," she recounted. She took a sip of bottled water. "We could trade citizenship for any pre-war tech any pony could scrounge up." "Why would some pony trade tech for citizenship?" I asked. "I wouldn't cut a deal that way. Citizenship got you housing, protection, clean water, fresh food, and one of these babies." She waved her hoof out to bring attention to the device on her foreleg. The only tech I really had any knowledge of was cameras and projectors. The only thing I knew about what was on the two ladies' limbs was that they looked damn uncomfortable. "And that is..." I gestured to her to continue. Eclair actually jumped into the conversation. "This is a pit book. Best stick of technology ever made. It tells time, has maps, has a radio, keeps track of your to-do list, manages your junk, points out blokes who want it to kid and scrap with you, and best of all, helps you aim." She listed off carefully. How her accent got so different from her mother, I'll never know. Nevertheless, it seemed like it was useful. "Can it play movies?" I asked. Maybe the trip wouldn't be so boring after all. "Nope." Thus, my hopes were dashed into the deck and ground to dust. "Tough sell, but I'll pass," I said. "All this talk about home is boring. Tell me about sea ponies," Eclair announced. I looked at Sorbet, who shrugged and rolled her eyes. "Come bothering when something interesting happens," Sorbet said as she shuffled her way to her cot and lowered the palm tree drapes. Eclair looked back at me with expectant eyes. I sighed. Despite my job description, I hated preaching. Long ago, after the last day of the Old War, the youngest of the three demigods, Poseidon, was born. He was born in the form of the sea pony, but had the blood and soul of a god within him. I began. She leaned in closer. I kept poking her, but she was being stubborn. "Wake up," I implored. Sorbet slowly tossed herself over to face me. Her eyes were half closed, blinking the sleep from her eyes. "Where's the fire?" she asked, rubbing her face. "You told me to wake you up when something interesting happened, right?" "Yeah, and?" She gestured for me to continue on. I figured visuals helped more than words. I rolled up the drapes around her cot. It was foggy outside, but the focus of her gaze was clear. The hulking mass of rusted metal next to her mighty Poseidon loomed nearby. Okay, the mighty Poseidon is a bit of an embellishment. The remarkably still floating ship hidden in its own little pocket of mist had snuck up on us. "That's pretty interesting," she finally said, her jaw loose at its hinges. "Is there anyone on it?" "Doubt it. No life rafts and no lights. We got ourselves a ghost ship," I said. "No pony on board. She said more to herself than any pony. Oh, the wheels in her head were a-turnin'. "Salvage?" I offered. She was, though, a couple minutes further. "Salvage," she confirmed. I nodded in return. This boat could have something we need. Medicine, tools, weapons, Casablanca, the director's cut. The possibility was there. All that said, I've seen this movie before. A 200-year-old abandoned ship surrounded by mist appears from nowhere, and somebody decides to go treasure hunting? That's a B-rated horror movie flick right there. Gotta do this right. "Okay, since you can't move that well, I'll go on board. You and Eclair stay here. You hear something bad, start sailing," I said my plan. She shook her head. "No, you take Eclair with you. She's good at scrounging, and you'll get done faster with two," she said. Please let me be paranoid in peace. "Look, this thing looks like it could fall apart at any minute. You want to put your daughter on there?" I put that little tidbit in there for good measure. Her eyes widened a bit, and she glanced at Eclair. Or where she was supposed to be. The Poseidon only had 2 passengers at the moment. "You two coming or not?" Eclair called to us from the main deck of the rusted hulk. "Poseidon, protect this child, for she may be the death of me." Or vice versa. Sorbet launched toward the ship, but then she inhaled sharply. She shouldn't move like that. She's liable to open a wound. "Look, calm down. I'll make sure she's safe. Yell if you need help," I tried to reassure her. She nodded, slightly shivering. I really shouldn't have tried to guilt her into them both staying. I started making my way up the ladder. Whoever designed these things did not have flippers in mind. My telekinesis helped me put weight behind the fins in my tail, but by the time I was at the top, I was breathing heavy. Eclair stood at the top of a fallen remains of a crane. Part of the deck had caved in and brought down the crane. The crane had smashed open a storage container. Small brown boxes sprawled out from the wreck. Many of the boxes and their contents were smashed. Eclair was shifting through them. "Some goodies in here, Reptide. I can't tell what, though," she said to me. The scolding I was about to give her had to wait, as an unbroken box had been tossed to me. It had equestrian military markings. I rubbed away some of the dust. MRE. Ha! These were soldiers' lunchboxes. "These are meals ready to eat. I guess these guys were doing some government work," I answered the filly. "Might as well make use of her while she's here. I'll spank her later. Pile up the good ones and we'll take them with us when we're done." "Righto, boss," she replied and started carrying a few boxes towards the port side. That's the left side for those of you who aren't nautically inclined. I made my way to the cabin towards the back. The door screeched as it was open. My horn glowed. Navy blue wasn't the best light for illumination, but I could see better than before. Dust flared up from decades, maybe centuries of stillness. Immediately before me were stairs going up to what I assumed was the control deck. Stairs down led to the cargo hold and engine room. Beyond those stairs were 2 doors, one leading left and the other directly ahead. I walked to the doors. Dust lazily fell as I pushed open both doors. The mess hall and the crew quarters were before me. There were 10 bunks, 5 on each wall. Most of them were unmade, but 2 of them completely bare. A couple of posters were on the wall. "Enlist today," one of them said. Another one was actually a pin-up calendar, with bears around artillery with sultry looks, or a Rosy Rivets photo. One poster was slightly creepy, though. A pink earth pony was staring at me with a huge grin. "Forever!" was the only word I could make out of it. Tearing my attention away from the posters, I looked to the potential gold mine. 10 lockboxes underneath each bunk. The ones near the unmade beds were empty. Not surprising. They are also the ones without padlocks on them. I took out my club. My horn glowed as I lifted it up. I gritted my teeth as I swung. "You'll break it that way," Eclair said. "When the hell did she get here?" My club clattered to the ground as my concentration was broken. "I thought that was the point of me hitting it," I replied. "Yeah, but you'll get it open, but your club will be busted too." She moved over to the lockbox, pushing me over, and then she brought her mane in front of her face. She pulled out a bobby pin. "You got a screwdriver handy?" I sifted through my bags and pulled out a diving knife. She shrugged. I'll do. Give it here," she ordered. I nodded and gave it to her. "Don't cut yourself," I warned as she put the bobby pin and the knife into the padlock. She fiddled a little bit, turning the bobby pin, and then she started to turn the lock and click. The padlock came loose from the lockbox. She gave a little curtsy. "Don't get cocky now. Let's see if there's anything good first," I said, pushing up the lid. Clothes came into view. We started shifting for the stuff. A bag of pre-war bits was the first interesting thing we found. Then a book filled with drawings of buildings and ships. And at the bottom of the bin was a thing that made Eclair's eyes light up. She took it out quickly, giving it a once-over. "Captain Equestria, Volume 1, in mint condition." "There's no pages missing. This is awesome!" She started to giggle and danced in place. She quickly took it and put it in the take pile. I smiled. "Think you can sort through the rest of these while I check the mess hall?" I asked. She nodded and started on the next box. I walked out the room and into the mess hall. The table in the center was overturned and lots of trash were on the ground, most likely due to the crane outside falling over. However, I wasn't interested in any of that. I was interested in the fact that the first aid kit was above the counter. I popped the sucker open. Nothing too good was inside, but useful stuff still. There was gauze, a sewing kit, a few band-aids, and mostly important, painkillers. They were expired, but an expiration date on medicine only counts if it's liquid. I emptied the lot into my saddlebags. The fridge was actually cold, surprisingly. Not much to raid, though. I grabbed a few bottles of vodka and a sparkle cola and tossed them into my saddlebags. I slid a couple of cooking knives into my bags as well. I was the only one with weapons, which basically means if I'm away, these ladies are defenseless. Given Sorbet's current state, she probably needs something more than shooty persuasion. I walked back out into the hallway. Eclair had loaded up the take pile into 2 of the lockboxes and was dragging them out towards the pile of MREs. I stepped up the stairs to the control deck. The deck was in disarray. A small section in the corner had a cot and a few amenities. Apparently, the captain enjoyed a very Spartan existence. A map was pinned on the wall behind the wheel. A slightly green glow filled the room. Near the front of the room, there was a glass screen of a terminal that was lit. I poked the keys. Words flashed on the screen. "Data corruption due to unauthorized access detected. Only recently saved files available. Enter passwords." Oh crap, okay, how do they do this in the movies? Registry key log. Processing. Key log stores granted. A huge mess of letters and symbols filled the screen. Out of the cluster, a few words could be seen. Of these words was the passcode. I tried a couple and... seriously? The password was password. No wonder they had unauthorized access. I clicked OK. A few files showed up. They were labeled damage report, shipping records, and captain's log. The shipping records told me that these guys were carrying. It wasn't much, just food and building materials like concrete and rebar. Wrench just figured out what had happened. Engine was crushed. Crane fell through and smashed it after the explosion. We're dead in the water. Short wave's down, can't raise anyone. The thing is, however, Wrench says the explosion didn't come from the engine. Something blew that caused the crane to crush the engine. And when he was playing with the radio, he found a cut wire. Something ain't right. That's interesting. Tell me more, Captain's log. Log entry 56. Date? Corrupted. I have reason to believe that someone on this ship caused the explosion that stopped us dead. Doc, amongst the 8 of them, turned up records of tapping noises in the rear cargo hold. I'll investigate myself. I hope the Celestia whoever did this is a stowaway. If not... Ooh, that's a good movie plot right there. Wouldn't mind seeing that in the back of the feeder. Curiosity sated, I pulled the map off the wall and headed towards the main deck. Eclair was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. She cocked her head to the side. Nope, nothing good. Let's get downstairs and ramp this up, I said. She shrugged and began heading down to the cargo hold. Save for the hole caused by the crane that punctured through the engine room, it was black as pitch. Suddenly, a bright light near blinded me. I turned to face the peril, only to find that it was Eclair's pit thingy. The new light revealed lots of bags. Bags full of concrete mix. Boring. We went behind the concrete bags to find I-beams and other such building materials. Nothing we could use. I edged my way past the hole in the floor, the crushed engine rusting in the open air. A small pool of water reflected the daylight back up at us. One door was attached to the wall. With a little effort, the door swung open. Then I realized that this boat was never abandoned. The bones of 8 ponies found their resting place in this room. The tattered remains of the clothes flaked off them in the gentle breeze. I looked at their bodies. There was a hole bored into one of their heads. These ponies died in a firefight. I closed my eyes. The projector started running. Captain Musketgall pushed open the rear storage room door. He looked around severely. The first mate was fiddling with something in a box, tapping against pipes in the wall. He froze and looked at the captain. "Captain, you startled me. What are you doing down here?" the first mate asked. "I could ask you the same dear question, boy. There'd been evidence of foul play, all of it leading to this room, where I find you after hours." "You'll find nothing of the sort here, Captain," the first mate said. "I hope so. That said, I must have the others detain you, in case you are the culprit, and it would further seek to sabotage this vessel." He turned towards the exit. Bang! The captain's blood leaked out of his forehead as he lay on the ground. The first mate, pistol at ready, walked over to him. "Don't worry, I'm already done," he said coolly. Rushed hoofsteps resounded as the rest of the crew burst into the storage room. The visions of the first mate melted away as the zebra infiltrator tossed away his amulet. Gunshots rang out, and the first 3 fell quickly. The other 4 crew members produced rifles and began returning fire. The zebra was perforated with bullets, blood spraying across the wall. Suddenly, the zebra lurched and fired his weapon wildly. The final crew member fell dead, the door closing behind them. I gathered the rifles, standard bolt-action 30.06 rifles. Very poor condition, though. The actions on each of them were rusted. Hell, a few of them wouldn't even budge. The ammo itself was unusable in its current state. Strange, then, was the Zebra 9mm pistol being in decent repair. The only problem was that 9mm was that it had no ammo. I turned around to the bones of the crew and bowed my head. "May Celestia's light guide you in the afterlife," I chanted. A snort was heard behind me. "Ain't that a nice sentiment?" a rough, smoker's voice said from behind me. I whipped around. A unicorn with a torn face stood behind me, a red-tinged glow enveloping a machete. He wore what looked like tires flapped around his chest. His eyes were yellowed in a glare. Worst of all, Eclair was nowhere to be found. "So, freak show, you just wandering about, huh?" he said, advancing towards me. He already got his weapon drawn. He'd been on me before I could do anything decent. "Now what happened to hospitality?" I asked. I went through my assets. "Shut up, fish stick. Or do I have to smoke you like some salmon?" He smiled. I wish he didn't. Half his teeth were missing. I didn't want to, but I started to chuckle. "What's so funny, freak show?" he sneered. I knew what I had to do. "Oh, just wondering something," I mused. "What's that?" He was getting angry. Good. This makes it better. What's faster? I whipped out the 9mm and shoved it in his face. My bullets? Or your blade? His eyes widened to dinner plates. Now hold on, he started. Back the fuck up, I commanded. He stepped back a few. No problem, pal. I ain't worth a bullet now, he begged. I kept my gun trained on him. Shut up. Keep going, I said. Had to control the situation. Gotcha, pal. Gotcha, he said, continuing to back up. I kept it on the tip of his hooves. Did you see a filly around here? I asked him. He shook his head. Okay. He clears all right. One last thing, I ordered. He shook his head up and down. Watch your step, I said. His eyes widened. He looked behind him, only to realize he was standing on the edge of the hole the crane had made. He looked back at me. Only the distance had been closed. I kicked him into the engine room. No scream, just the flood sound. I looked at him. A piece of rebar found its way into the back of his skull and through his right eye socket. His small intestine was wrapped around a broken piston of the engine. Every odd minute or so, his leg would twitch. I backed away from the hole and nodded. Ow. I was about to continue when I heard a small tink, and it caught my attention. The unicorn had dropped his machete. My magic wrapped around it as I brought it to my eyes. Thanks, friend. I'll think I'll hold on to this, I said while putting it into my saddlebags. Ah! A shrill voice called out. I jerked upwards. That was Sorbet. My hooves beat metal as I bolted for the stairs. I burst down onto the main deck. There were 4 of them. 3 earth ponies. One had a rotten top hat on. Another had some armor. The other, next to Sorbet, had 1 eye. And a unicorn. They all had knives and machetes, but one of the earth ponies had some bastard of a gun made from pipe and clock bits. They looked surprised to see me. Sorbet was on the deck, blindfolded at knife point. No sign of Eclair. The pony with the gun must have been their de facto leader, because he spoke up first and was the most protected. The hell kind of toxic muck did you roll in to look like that? He asked. The most of them started laughing. Might as well add to the joke. Nah, was born this way. Dak said Mama had to stop drinking, but no, I said. They started laughing some more. A glint of light came from the gun-wielding pony. Ah, I like this guy. It's almost a shame, he replied. How so? I asked. If tried the gun trick again, he'd just shoot me. I had to think, and the flashing wasn't helping. It's distracting enough to figure out where it's coming from the hatch to the cargo bay. See? Everything on this boat belongs to us now. Since you're on this boat, so do you, he said. He gestured to the top-hatted pony of his crew. He started going towards me, knife drawn. Look, you want my stuff? Here, I'll make it easy for you, I said, pulling the strap on my saddlebags and dumping the contents on the deck. Nice try. But we'll do this our way, the pony said, heading towards me. Fine then, we'll do this your way. Fine, I said, looking up to the sky, then lurched forward and grabbed the machete in my mouth. Think fast, I screamed. My magic burst behind as the kitchen knives picked up. Like bullets, they flew straight into the gun pony. One punctured his throat, the other his eye. I ducked. My ear started to bleed. I got nicked by a knife. The pony was falling through with his swing. I jammed my machete towards him. He started gurgling as he drowned in his own blood. And unicorn on the far left launched a knife at me. I shoved the pony I just stabbed into the flying knife. My spear darted out like a lightning bolt into the chest of the unicorn. Only one remained. The one-eyed pony. I glared at him with murder in my eyes. He looked at his fallen comrades. He screamed, bringing the knife to Sorbet. I sprinted towards him. Bang! Some invisible force had smashed itself into the one-eyed pony. I stopped in my tracks. I looked over to the source of the sound. Eclair was standing there with a bastard of a gun made from a pipe and clock bits, and a smoking barrel. I stood there in raw disbelief. Well, that could have been bad, I stated the obvious. I started to laugh. I was definitely high on adrenaline. The filly smiled. I told you I helped you, aim. Glad you got my plan, she said. What plan? I smiled back. It was a good haul. 12 MREs, 60 bits, bandages, pain meds, 6 knives, a machete, some matches, a 9mm Zebra officer pistol, 9mm pipe rifle, 39mm rounds, three 30.06 bolt action rifles, a comic book, 5 blankets, 2 bottles of vodka, a radio, and 5 bottles of Sparkle Cola. We were loading the booty onto the Poseidon. Busy work, especially since I had to go down to the damn ladder again. But we finished soon. I sighed as I pulled the harness over me. Had to get the boat away from the wreck if we were ever going to use the sail. I could use a nap. Leaping into the water, I heard a thud. The radio fell over and sparked. Out quiet now by Sweetie Belle. Thanks for listening, children. This is DJ Pone 3 telling you the truth, no matter how bad it hurts. Footnotes. Level up. All skills at least 25. Perk gained. Heave ho! Thrown items have a 50% more velocity and distance. Reader's notes. Sorry I couldn't get the chapter out earlier, guys. I know I'm usually doing a chapter a day, but I was hanging out with my friends all weekend, so no real time to record. And, the other day I just really wasn't feeling so good. I hope you're enjoying the audiobook as much as I am. I'm trying to take the advice that people on YouTube are giving me, and, I hope you enjoy the little bit of audio editing I put into this. Not too much, but I'm working on it. I'm still brand new to this whole thing, so please have a bit of, leeway. Thanks a lot. I hope you guys enjoy it, and, rock on, I guess? That's a terrible phrase. Bye-bye.